My grandmother saw me sleeping in my car and asked, "Where is the house I gave you?" I said, "My mother took it from me and gave it to my sister." Then my grandmother lost it. I was 22 years old when I learned that family could be the cruelest trap of all. Not in some dramatic, movie-worthy way with betrayals that come out of nowhere and villains who twirl metaphorical mustaches. No, the real cruelty is the slow, suffocating kind that wraps around your throat so gradually you don't notice you can't breathe until you're gasping on the floor wondering how you got there. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with 6 other people, and when I say lived, I mean existed in the margins of other people's chaos. My parents occupied 1 bedroom. My older brother, who was 28 years old and should have had his own place years ago, shared the other bedroom with his husband and their 2 kids, ages 5 and 3. That's 7 people crammed into 800 square feet of peeling wallpaper, water-stained ceilings, and arguments that echoed through paper-thin walls at 3 in the morning when normal people were supposed to be sleeping. Me? I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room, except it didn't fully pull out anymore because the mechanism was broken, so this metal bar dug into my spine every single night no matter how I positioned myself. I'd wake up with bruises along my lower back, dark purple marks that I'd hide under my work clothes and pretend didn't hurt. Privacy was a joke I'd forgotten how to laugh at. The bathroom was a battleground with its own schedule. The kitchen belonged to whoever got there first, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd been alone for more than 5 minutes at a time. My brother had never held a steady job in his entire adult life. I'm not exaggerating for effect here. 28 years old, and the longest he'd ever stuck with employment was 3 months at a fast food place when he was 19. And even then, my parents had to drive him to work most days because he didn't feel like taking the bus. Every time someone asked, my parents would launch into this rehearsed explanation about how he needed to stay home with the kids, how childcare was too expensive these days, how he was just between opportunities and something would come along soon. The truth was simpler and so much uglier. My brother didn't want to work, and our parents let him get away with it because he was their precious firstborn son who could do no wrong. His husband had the same work ethic, which is to say none at all. They'd been looking for jobs for the past 4 years, or at least that's what they told everyone. Looking apparently meant scrolling through their phones on the couch while the kids destroyed the apartment and I paid for the groceries that fed everyone because heaven forbid those children go without their favorite snacks. Meanwhile, I dragged myself out of that broken pull-out couch every morning at 5:30, showered in a bathroom that always had someone else's wet towels on the floor, and drove 40 minutes through traffic to my administrative assistant position at a small insurance company. I made $1,800 a month, which sounds like it should be enough until you remember that my car payment was $320, my phone bill was $70, my car insurance was another $150, and I was somehow always the one buying toilet paper, dish soap, laundry detergent, and yes, those damn groceries because someone had to, and it certainly wasn't going to be my brother or his husband. I was barely surviving, and they were living off my scraps while complaining it wasn't enough. But the real financial backbone of that disaster wasn't me. It was my grandmother, my mom's mother, who had somehow become the unofficial bank for my brother's incompetence. She sent $2,500 every single month, $2,500, more than my entire paycheck, more than enough to cover rent and food and basics for a family of 4. Sent like clockwork on the first of every month directly into my parents' account, because my brother couldn't be trusted to manage money, and somehow, it was never enough. Every few weeks, I'd overhear my mother on the phone with her, voice syrupy sweet in that particular way that meant she was asking for something. "Mom, I know you already sent this month's payment, but we had an unexpected expense with the kids' school supplies." Or, "Mom, the car broke down and we need it fixed to take the kids to their doctor appointments." Or, "Mom, we're a little short this month. Could you possibly help us out?" Always with that edge of desperation that made it impossible to say no. Always with the unspoken threat that if she didn't send more, the grandchildren would suffer somehow. My grandmother would send another few $100s, sometimes 1,000, and my parents would promise to pay her back. They never did. She never expected them to. My grandmother was 74 years old and had the kind of spine that didn't bend for anyone. She'd built a small sewing and alterations business from absolutely nothing, starting when she was just 17 after her own parents kicked her out for getting pregnant out of wedlock back in the 1960s. She'd told me the story once when I was 16, sitting at her kitchen table while she hemmed a customer's dress. Her voice had been matter-of-fact, like she was describing someone else's life instead of her own. How she'd gone hungry, actually hungry. Not the, "I'm dieting" kind, but the, "I haven't eaten in 2 days and my stomach feels like it's eating itself" kind. How she'd slept in women's shelters and occasionally on park benches when the shelters were full. How she'd fought for every scrap of dignity in a world that thought unwed teenage mothers were garbage. How she'd vowed never to ask her parents for anything ever again. And she'd kept that promise even when my mother was born weighing barely 5 pounds because my grandmother hadn't been eating enough. She'd made it work through pure, stubborn will and hands that bled from sewing 16 hours a day. By the time I was born, she owned her own shop, had paid off her small house, and had enough in savings to retire comfortably. She'd earned every cent of her piece. Maybe that's why she looked at me differently than everyone else in the family did. She saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself yet. Some echo of that same stubborn determination buried under years of saying yes when I meant no and apologizing for existing. She'd told me once, "You remind me of myself at your age before life beat it out of me." I hadn't understood then what she meant. I do now. My 22nd birthday fell on a Wednesday, and I remember that detail specifically because I'd requested the day off from work 3 weeks in advance. I never took days off, never called in sick even when I actually was sick, never used my vacation time because I was too afraid of being seen as unreliable or lazy. But my birthday felt like it should be special somehow, even if I was just planning to spend it alone in a coffee shop with a book, pretending I had a life outside that suffocating apartment. I was folding laundry in my designated corner of the living room at around 10 in the morning when my phone rang. My grandmother's name lit up the screen, and I answered immediately because ignoring her calls was not something anyone in our family dared to do. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm, but carrying that particular tone that meant she'd already made up her mind about something and nothing I said would change it. "I have a surprise for you, a big one. I'm leaving now, should be there in about 3 hours. Make sure everyone's home when I get there." My stomach dropped slightly. "You don't have to drive all that way. I mean, it's not that important. It's very important. And I'm already packed. See you soon." She hung up before I could argue further. I stood there holding a half-folded towel, trying to figure out what surprise required my entire family to be present. My mother appeared from the kitchen, arms crossed over her chest in her default defensive posture. "Who was that?" "Grandma. She's coming over in a few hours. She said she has a surprise and wants everyone here." Something passed across my mother's face then, too quick for me to read, but definitely there. She and my father exchanged one of those looks that couples develop after decades together. An entire conversation happening in the space of 3 seconds. "What kind of surprise?" She didn't say. "Well," my mother's voice went tight. "I guess we'll find out." The next 3 hours felt like waiting for a storm. My brother and his husband cleaned up the living room in a half-hearted way, shoving toys into corners and wiping down surfaces that hadn't been touched in weeks. My father disappeared into the bedroom and came back wearing a nicer shirt. My mother stress-cleaned the kitchen, which she only did when she was anxious about something. I sat on my pull-out couch feeling like I was about to disappoint everyone somehow, though I couldn't figure out why. My grandmother arrived at exactly 1 o'clock carrying a large manila envelope that seemed far too thin to contain anything of real value. She hugged me first, holding on a beat longer than usual, then distributed quick embraces to everyone else. The kids were bouncing around her legs asking if she brought them presents, and she smiled at them but said, "Not today, loves. Today's about your aunt." We all crowded into the living room, which suddenly felt even smaller with everyone squeezed in. My parents took the only 2 chairs. My brother leaned against the wall with his husband, both of them watching intently. The kids settled on the floor with unusual obedience, sensing this was something important even if they didn't understand what. I perched on the arm of the couch, feeling like an afterthought at my own celebration, which honestly described most of my life. My grandmother stood in the center of the room and opened the envelope. Inside were keys, several official-looking documents, and what appeared to be photographs. She pulled everything out slowly, deliberately, like she wanted this moment to last. "Chloe," she said, looking directly at me while everyone else leaned forward trying to see. "I've been thinking about your future for a long time now. About what you need, what you deserve, and what would actually help you build a real life." My heart started pounding. "Grandma, you don't have to." "Hush, let me finish." She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that held secrets. "Last month, I bought a house. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms in that quiet neighborhood over by the park. You know the area, with the nice tree-lined streets and the good schools." She paused, and I could feel everyone in the room holding their breath. "The deed is in your name. Only your name. The house is yours, completely paid off. No mortgage, no rent, no strings attached." The room went absolutely silent. One of the kids started to say something, but my brother shushed him quickly. I couldn't process the words, couldn't make them mean what they seemed to mean. What?" My grandmother pulled out the deed and held it up so I could see my name printed there in official legal text. It's yours, Chloe. Your house, your future, your fresh start. I can't accept this. The words came out automatically, programmed into me by years of being told I didn't deserve nice things. It's too much, way too much. You shouldn't have. I should have, and I did. Her voice was firm now, brooking no argument. You're the only one in this family with your head on straight. You work hard, you pay your bills, you don't make excuses or expect handouts. You deserve security. You deserve a place that's actually yours. I looked around the room then, trying to gauge everyone's reactions. My mother's face was frozen in something that might have been a smile but definitely wasn't reaching her eyes. My father had his arms crossed, staring at the deed like it had personally insulted him. My brother's expression was dark, his jaw clenched tight, and I could see his hands balling into fists at his sides. Only the kids seemed genuinely happy, probably because they were too young to understand what 3 empty bedrooms meant in a family where 7 people shared 800 square feet. Can we see pictures? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My grandmother handed me the photographs, and I almost stopped breathing. It was beautiful. Not fancy or huge, but clean and bright and new-looking. 3 real bedrooms with doors that closed and probably even locked. 2 full bathrooms with modern fixtures. A kitchen with appliances that looked like they'd been installed this decade. A small backyard with a patch of grass and room for maybe a garden someday. Tomorrow morning, my grandmother said, I'll take you to see it in person. We'll do the final walkthrough. I'll give you all the keys and documents, and it's yours. Official. I tried to thank her, but my throat was too tight. I managed a nod, clutching the photographs like they might disappear if I loosened my grip. My grandmother hugged me again, and I felt her whisper against my ear. Don't let anyone take this from you. Do you understand me? No one. At the time, I thought she was just being dramatic. Now I know she was trying to warn me. The next morning, my grandmother picked me up at 8 sharp. The drive to the house took 23 minutes through streets that got progressively quieter and prettier. Trees lining the sidewalks, houses with actual yards instead of just concrete. We pulled up to a small blue house with white trim and a little front porch, and my grandmother handed me the keys with a smile that said she knew exactly how overwhelmed I felt. Go on, she said. It's yours. You should be the first one to open the door. My hand shook as I fitted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and the door swung open to reveal hardwood floors that gleamed in the morning light, walls painted a soft cream color, and windows that let in so much natural light it felt like a different world from the dark apartment I'd been living in. The living room was furnished with a couch that didn't pull out and probably didn't have any broken springs. The kitchen had a full-sized refrigerator, a stove with all 4 burners working, a dishwasher that looked brand new. I opened cabinets to find actual matching dishes, pots and pans that weren't warped from overuse, utensils that didn't have half the set missing. The bedrooms are upstairs, my grandmother said, following me through the house. 3 bedrooms, 3 actual rooms with doors and closets and windows. The master bedroom had enough space for a queen bed and dressers. The other 2 were smaller but still bigger than any personal space I'd ever had. I stood in the middle of what would be my bedroom and tried to imagine what it would feel like to close a door and know I was alone. Really alone. Not just pretending everyone else wasn't on the other side of a thin wall. The backyard was small but had potential. A patch of grass, some overgrown bushes that could be trimmed, space for maybe a little garden if I learned how to plant things. I could see myself out here on weekend mornings with coffee, not hiding in a bathroom to get 5 minutes of peace. Here. My grandmother pressed a folder into my hands. All the paperwork. Deed, title, utility information, warranty information for the appliances, everything you need. The house is paid off completely. No mortgage. Your only costs will be property taxes, utilities, and maintenance. With your salary, you can easily cover that and still have money left over for yourself for the first time in your life. I don't know what to say. My voice cracked. It's too much. You shouldn't have spent this much money on me. I'm 74 years old. Chloe. I have no intention of leaving my money to people who'll waste it or gamble it away or use it to enable their own laziness. You're the only one who'll actually make something of your life. This isn't charity. This is an investment in the one person in our family who deserves it. She stayed for another hour, showing me how to work the thermostat, where the circuit breaker was, which neighbors were friendly. Then she hugged me goodbye and said something that I didn't fully understand until later. I'm leaving tomorrow for Europe. 2-month trip to visit an old friend. I'll be out of cell range most of the time, but I'll check in when I can. You take care of yourself, okay? And remember what I said. Don't let anyone take this from you. I won't, I promised, having no idea how badly I was about to break that promise. I drove back to the apartment feeling like I was floating. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I had hope. Real, solid hope based on something concrete instead of just wishful thinking. I had a future that didn't involve a broken pull-out couch and other people's drama. I could move out, have my own space, breathe without feeling like the walls were closing in. That hope lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. The moment I walked through the apartment door, I knew something was wrong. My entire family was waiting in the living room, positioned like they'd rehearsed this. My mother stood blocking the hallway to my corner, arms crossed. My father was by the front door, cutting off my exit. My brother sat on my pull-out couch like he owned it, his husband beside him with that particular expression of wounded righteousness they'd both perfected. "So," my mother said, her voice artificially casual, "have you made a decision yet, or are you going to keep being selfish?" I blinked, genuinely confused. "What decision?" "About the house, Chloe. Don't play dumb." She uncrossed her arms and moved closer. "Obviously you're going to let us move in. Your brother needs it more than you do." My stomach dropped so fast I actually felt dizzy. "The house is mine. Grandma gave it to me specifically. The deed is in my name. And you're giving it to your family. That's what family does. They help each other. They don't hoard things while their own nephews suffer." My father's voice came from behind me, making me jump. I spun around to face him. "I'm not hoarding anything. And I want to help, I do. But the house is what?" My brother stood up. And I noticed his eyes were red like he'd been crying. How long had he been sitting there working himself up? "The house is too good for us? Is that what you were going to say?" "No. I just mean that Grandma specifically said it was for me. She put it in my name only." "Grandma's an old woman who doesn't know what she's doing anymore." My mother cut me off. "She's losing touch with reality, making impulsive decisions. We all know that. She seemed perfectly fine to me." "Of course she did. She's good at hiding it." My mother moved even closer, lowering her voice. "Sweetheart, I know you're attached to the idea of having your own place. But think about the bigger picture. You're 22, single, no responsibilities. You can live anywhere. Your brother has children, 2 small children sleeping in bunk beds crammed into one tiny room. The guilt was already creeping up my throat. I could picture my nephews, cramped and uncomfortable. Meanwhile, my father added, you'd have 3 empty bedrooms. 3, while your nephews sleep on top of each other. How is that fair? Maybe I could help you find a bigger apartment, or help with rent somewhere." My mother actually laughed. "With what money, Chloe? You make $1,800 a month. You can barely help yourself. Then how would I afford the house? The house is paid off. No mortgage, just utilities and taxes, which is way less than rent. You'd be fine, but you won't let your family be fine. Will you? That's not what I'm trying to do. You know what's not fair?" My brother's voice cracked with emotion. "I've been trying to find work for years, and we're stuck in this apartment because we can't afford anything better. My kids ask me why other families have nice houses and we don't. And now there's finally a solution. And you want to keep it for yourself. The house was given to me, specifically to me, by an old woman who barely knows what day it is," my mother shot back. "Don't you think it's interesting that she gave you a house but didn't even mention it to me first? Her own daughter? That's someone who's confused and easily manipulated." "I didn't manipulate anyone. I never asked for this. I tried to refuse it." "Oh, you tried." My mother's voice dripped with sarcasm. "But not very hard, since you took the keys anyway." The next 2 weeks were the worst of my entire life up to that point. What happened that first night was just the opening act. It got so much more relentless, so much more surgical in how they cut me down piece by piece. Every morning I'd wake up to my mother asking loudly if I'd reconsidered yet, if I was going to keep being heartless. My father would make comments during dinner about how family loyalty was dead in this generation, how young people only thought about themselves. My brother would walk past me with the kids, pointing me out and sighing dramatically, letting his 5-year-old see his disappointment. The 5-year-old, by the way, was deployed as a weapon. "Daddy says Aunt Chloe doesn't want us to have a nice house," I overheard him tell his younger brother one afternoon. Another time, "Aunt Chloe has 3 whole bedrooms, but we have to share one. That's not nice." I tried talking to my brother about using his kids like that. "Please don't involve them in this. It's between us adults. Everything involving my children is my business. And they're old enough to understand when someone in the family is being selfish. Better they learn now what kind of person you really are." I couldn't escape it because I lived there. Couldn't hide in my corner because it was in the middle of the main living space. Couldn't lock myself in the bathroom because someone always needed it. I was a captive audience to my own character assassination. Week 2 got creative with the guilt tactics. You know Grandma doesn't even ask about you when we talk to her, right? My mother mentioned casually one morning while I was trying to eat breakfast. We talked to her yesterday before she left for her trip. She asked about your brother's kids for 20 minutes. Didn't mention your name once. I knew this was probably a lie, but it worked anyway. The seed of doubt was planted. I saw the house listings for this neighborhood, my father said a few days later. A 3-bedroom like that would rent for at least $2,000 a month, easy. You're sitting on $2,000 a month of value while your family struggles. Really think about that. My brother tried crying, actual tears streaming down his face, voice breaking. My youngest asked me yesterday why we're poor. Do you know how that feels? Having to explain to a 3-year-old why other kids have their own rooms and toys and nice things and we don't. You could get a job, I whispered, immediately regretting it. I'm trying. His voice rose to a shout. Do you think I'm not trying? Do you think I enjoy being unemployed? I apply to places every week. No one will hire me. And now I find out my own sister, who I've helped raise. You didn't help raise me. I'm 22. You were 6 when I was born. My own sister would rather let my kids suffer than give up one of her 3 empty bedrooms. How am I supposed to process that? How am I supposed to explain that to them? By day 10, I was barely sleeping. The metal bar in the pull-out couch seemed to dig deeper, or maybe I'd just lost any tolerance for discomfort. I'd lie there at 2 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, listening to my own thoughts spiral. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was selfish. Who needed 3 bedrooms? I didn't even know what I'd do with all that space. And the kids really were cramped. That 5-year-old had mentioned it to me directly the other day. Mommy says when you give us the house, I can have my own room. I was losing weight because my stomach was constantly in knots. Food tasted like ash. I'd force myself to eat because I had to function at work, but I'd spend my lunch breaks crying in my car, trying to hold it together long enough to make it through the afternoon. My coworker Sarah noticed something was wrong. Hey, you okay? You've been looking really tired lately. Just some insomnia. I'm fine. If you need to talk about anything, I'm fine, I said again, more firmly, because the last thing I needed was for my work life to fall apart too. By day 12, I'd stopped fighting back entirely. I just took it. Every comment, every guilt trip, every disappointment. I absorbed it all like a sponge soaking up toxic water, feeling myself get heavier and heavier with shame that didn't even belong to me. On day 14, I broke. It wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming or throwing things. It was quiet, pathetic, the way most real defeats are. I was sitting on my pull-out couch after dinner, and my mother came to stand in front of me. She didn't sit down, just stood there, looming, with that expression of disappointed parent that I'd seen my entire life whenever I didn't live up to some impossible standard. This has gone on long enough, she said. You're being cruel, and you know it. You're being vindictive and spiteful for no reason except your own selfishness. I'm not. Yes, you are. You're punishing your brother because you've always been jealous of him. You've always resented that he got more attention, that we loved him more, and now you finally have a chance to hurt him back and you're taking it. That wasn't even true. But it landed anyway because I was too worn down to defend myself. Your grandmother gave you that house because she's old and confused and doesn't understand what real family means anymore. But you do. Or at least I thought you did. Apparently, I was wrong about you. Apparently, you're exactly as selfish and cold as your father's side of the family. My father's side was a known insult in our house. They'd cut off contact with us years ago over some drama I'd never fully understood. My brother appeared then, right on cue, with his eyes red again. Probably splashed water on his face to make it look like he'd been crying. Please, Chloe. Please. My kids are asking why Aunt Chloe hates them. How do I answer that? What do I say? And just like that, I gave up. Okay, I whispered, the word barely audible. Okay, you can have it. The transformation was instant. My mother's face brightened into a smile. Oh, sweetheart. I knew you'd make the right choice. We always knew you had a good heart. We just had to remind you. My brother hugged me, and I stood there with my arms at my sides, feeling nothing. Thank you, he said into my shoulder. Thank you so much. This means everything. My father patted my back. Good girl. That's my daughter. Family first, always. They celebrated. Actually celebrated. Like they'd won something. My mother started making plans immediately about who would take which bedroom, what furniture they'd need to buy, when they could move. I sat on my couch and felt like I was watching myself from outside my body, some detached observer noting clinically that I'd just given away the only good thing that had ever happened to me. "Oh, and Chloe?" my mother said, pausing in her excited planning. "You can probably stay here for another month or so until you find another place. The lease is up at the end of next month anyway, so that should give you plenty of time." I nodded numbly. A month seemed like enough time. I could figure something out. I had a job. I'd find a room to rent somewhere. It would be fine. Except I didn't do anything. Couldn't. I was stuck in this weird, frozen state where I'd go to work on autopilot, come home, and sit on the couch staring at nothing. Every time I tried to search for apartments, I'd start shaking and have to stop. My brain had stopped working properly, like some essential circuit had fried and now basic functions were compromised. 5 days later, they moved out. Trucks and boxes and my entire family relocating to the house my grandmother had given me. They were excited, talking about all the space they'd have, how the kids would finally have room to play, how they were going to paint the bedrooms different colors. I helped carry boxes to the truck, each one feeling heavier than the last. And my brother didn't even look at me, except to say thanks when I handed him things. My mother was directing traffic, telling people where to put stuff, already mentally rearranging the house that was supposed to be mine. "Remember," she said as she got into her car to leave, "you've got until the end of next month here. Landlord wants us out by the 31st, so make sure you have somewhere lined up." "I will," I lied, because it was easier than admitting I couldn't seem to make my brain work. The apartment felt emptier with just me in it, which was ironic because it had always been too crowded before. Now it echoed. I had the pull-out couch, my corner with my stuff, and 800 square feet of space that belonged to someone else and reminded me of everything I'd lost. 15 days passed. I went to work, came home, sat on the couch. Repeated. I stopped checking apartment listings because each one required deposits I didn't have, references I couldn't provide, and energy I'd run out of weeks ago. On day 15, I came home from work to find my clothes in trash bags in the lobby. The doorman, an older guy named Frank who'd always been nice to me, looked actively uncomfortable. "Hey, Chloe, your family dropped these off this morning along with the keys. They said to tell you they're done with the lease and the landlord already has new tenants." I stared at the bags. 4 large black garbage bags containing everything I owned. "But the lease isn't up for another 2 weeks. Frank shifted his weight. "Yeah, I know, but they paid the early termination fee and the landlord accepted it. New people are moving in tomorrow." "I'm sorry." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pull out my phone. I called my mother, straight to voicemail. Called again. Same. Called my father. Voicemail. My brother. Voicemail. I stood there in the lobby calling and calling, my breath coming faster. Panic rising, and every single call went to voicemail because every single one of them had blocked my number. I tried my grandmother. Her phone rang twice, then went to voicemail too, but that was different. She was overseas, traveling, out of cell range like she'd said. I left a message, trying to keep my voice steady. "Grandma, it's me. Please call me back as soon as you get this. It's important. Really important. I need your help. Please." But she didn't call back. Not that day, not that week, not for the next 2 months because she was on the other side of the world without reliable cell service and had no idea what had happened. Frank helped me carry the bags to my car. He didn't say anything, probably didn't know what to say, and I was grateful for the silence because I couldn't have responded anyway. My throat was too tight, my chest too compressed, my brain screaming that this couldn't be happening even though it obviously was. I loaded everything into my 15-year-old car and sat in the driver's seat trying to figure out what to do. I had $412 in my savings account. That's it. $12 and change after $400. Not enough for first, last, and deposit anywhere. Not enough for anything except gas and food if I was careful. I'd been helping my family with groceries every week. Extra money here and there when they needed it. "Can you cover toilet paper this week? We're short $20 for the kids' snack stuff. Can you get dish soap when you're out?" All those 20s and 30s adding up to me having nothing when I needed something. The dashboard clock said 5:47 p.m. I had work tomorrow morning at 8. I needed to look professional. I needed to sleep somewhere. I needed to pretend I was a person who had their life together. I started the car and drove aimlessly for 20 minutes before pulling into a gas station. I went inside, bought a toothbrush and small toothpaste with change I scrounged from my cup holder, and used their bathroom to brush my teeth and wash my face. The fluorescent lights were harsh and showed me every shadow under my eyes, every new line that stress had carved into my face. I was 22 years old and homeless. That night, I parked on a busy street because isolated areas felt too dangerous. I used my winter coat as a blanket and tried to sleep sitting up because the back seat was full of my stuff, and I didn't want to unload it with no place to put it. I didn't sleep. Every car that passed made me jump, terrified it was a cop who'd tell me I couldn't park there. Every voice on the sidewalk made my heart race, imagining someone seeing me, recognizing me, knowing my shame. At 5 a.m., when the sky started to lighten, I drove to a different gas station and used their bathroom to change into my work clothes. I looked like hell. Bags under my eyes that makeup couldn't hide, my hair limp even after I tried to fix it, my skin gray and dull. I went to work, sat at my desk, typed things into my computer, answered phones, pretended to be fine. This became my routine. Sleep badly in the car, wake up early, clean up in gas station bathrooms, go to work, pretend to be human, repeat. Week 6 came and went. Every morning was the same routine. Wake up cramped and sore, drive to whichever gas station I hadn't used in the past few days, clean up as best I could in a public bathroom that smelled like industrial cleaner and other people's desperation. Sarah from work definitely knew something was wrong by then. She cornered me in the break room on a Thursday afternoon, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She set one in front of me and sat down without asking. "Okay," she said, "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's going on." "I'm fine, just tired." "Chloe, you've lost weight. You look exhausted. You're wearing the same rotation of 4 outfits. And yesterday I saw you washing your hair in the bathroom sink." She held up a hand when I started to protest. "I came in early. You didn't hear me. So please, just tell me the truth. Are you safe? Do you need help?" The kindness in her voice almost broke me. I opened my mouth, and for one terrifying second I almost told her everything. That I was living in my car, that my family had stolen my house, that I'd been showering in gas stations for 6 weeks. But the shame was too thick in my throat. "I'm dealing with some family stuff. Housing situation is temporary. I'm handling it." "Are you sure? Because if you need a place to crash for a few days..." "I'm sure." The lie tasted like metal. "Really, I appreciate you caring, but I'm okay." Sarah studied my face for a long moment. "All right. But Chloe, if that changes, you have my number. Day or night, I mean it." I nodded, not trusting my voice. She squeezed my hand and left me alone with the coffee I couldn't drink because my stomach was already in knots. I never took her up on the offer. Pride, shame, fear of judgment, all of it kept me trapped in my car when I could have asked for help. That's something I'll have to live with. Payday came. $1,800 deposited into my account, minus taxes. So really $1,400 something. My car insurance auto-deducted $320. My phone bill was $72. Gas for the week was $50. I needed to eat. I bought a sandwich from a drive-thru, the cheapest thing on the menu at $3.19. It came wrapped in paper that was already getting soggy from the lettuce, and I drove to an empty parking lot to eat it because eating while driving made me feel even more pathetic than I already did. It was a Tuesday afternoon, around 2, and the parking lot belonged to a family restaurant that didn't open until 5. Empty except for my car in the far corner where I'd learned to park to avoid attention. The sandwich was generic, tasteless, probably made hours ago and sitting under heat lamps. I was halfway through forcing myself to eat it when I saw them through my windshield. A family. Real, perfect, straight out of a commercial. Mom and Dad holding hands, 2 kids between them, all walking toward the restaurant even though it was closed. They were laughing about something, and the kids were doing that skipping thing children do when they're happy. And the mom bent down to fix the younger one's shoe, while the dad waited patiently, smiling at his wife with this expression of complete contentment. They were everything I would never have. Something inside me snapped. Not the quiet, slow breaking that had been happening for weeks. This was violent, instant, like a dam exploding all at once instead of cracking gradually. The sandwich fell out of my hands onto the passenger seat. I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled and went blurry, and I realized I was crying, but not normal crying. These horrible, gut-wrenching sobs that shook my entire body and made sounds I didn't know I could make. Animal sounds, raw and ugly, and nothing like the quiet tears I'd been forcing down for weeks. I punched the steering wheel, hard, again and again. My hands hurt, but I couldn't stop, needed to hit something, needed to make the pain external instead of this crushing internal weight. Why? I screamed at the ceiling, at God, at the universe, at no one. Why is this happening? What did I do? I tried to be good. I tried to help. I did everything they asked. No answer, just my own voice echoing in the car, pathetic and broken. I worked every day. I paid my bills. I helped them. I loved them. What was I supposed to do differently? The family was gone now. Had walked around to the back entrance or left, or maybe I'd imagined them entirely. I was alone in an empty parking lot having a complete breakdown in my car at 2:15 on a Tuesday afternoon. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen and there was nothing left. 20 minutes of complete dissolution, of being unmade at the molecular level. Then it stopped because it had to. Because I had work tomorrow and I needed to function. Because falling apart completely wasn't a luxury I could afford. I picked up the sandwich from the passenger seat. It had fallen apart, lettuce and meat scattered across the fabric. I gathered the pieces and ate them anyway because wasting food was wasting money, and I had $3.19 less than I did 15 minutes ago. It tasted like dust and shame, but I ate every bite. That night, I called my grandmother again, left another message. Please, Grandma, please call me back. I really need you, please. My voice cracked on the last word, and I hung up quickly before I started crying again. She never called back. She was somewhere in Europe with spotty cell service, having no idea her granddaughter was falling apart halfway across the world. Days became weeks, 2 months, 60 nights in my car, 60 mornings washing up in gas station sinks, 60 shifts at work where I smiled and filed papers and answered phones and pretended to be a person with a life. My body started giving out. My lower back was a constant scream of pain from the way I had to sleep. I'd wake up and couldn't straighten fully for the first hour. Had to walk hunched over like an old woman until my muscles loosened. My neck had a permanent crick. My shoulders were always tight, knotted with stress that had nowhere to go. I smelled. No matter how many sponge baths I took in gas station bathrooms, no matter how much deodorant I applied, I smelled like someone who lived in a car. Like stale air and body odor and unwashed clothes because laundromats cost money I didn't have to spare. I was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. Tired in my bones, in my brain, in every cell. Tired of being alert all the time, watching for cops or security guards who might tell me to move. Tired of pretending at work. Tired of fighting to get through each day. The worst part wasn't even the discomfort. It was the shame. The constant, crushing shame that followed me everywhere. When Sarah asked if I wanted to grab dinner after work, I had to decline because I couldn't explain why I couldn't spend $12 on a meal. When my boss mentioned I looked tired, I had to laugh it off. When other people talked about their apartments and complained about roommates, I had to smile and nod and pretend I understood the struggle of living with someone who left dishes in the sink. I parked in different places every night because staying in one spot felt dangerous. Shopping center parking lots where I'd blend in with the late-night shoppers. Residential streets where my old car wouldn't stand out. Sometimes the 24-hour diner where I'd buy a $3 coffee and sit inside for an hour just to be warm and around people, then sleep in the lot outside. I kept a blanket in the back seat and used it religiously because autumn was turning to winter and nights were getting colder. I'd curl up as much as the space allowed, trying to conserve body heat, and wonder how people did this long term. How did actual homeless people survive winters? What happened when it snowed? I didn't know. I was still pretending this was temporary even though 2 months had passed with no change in sight. Every few days I'd call my grandmother, leave messages. It's me. Please call when you can. Never explaining what happened because some part of me still wanted to protect my family even after everything. Still wanted to believe they'd made a mistake. They'd realize what they'd done. They'd reach out and apologize. They never did. The routine became automatic. I memorized gas station schedules, knew which ones had cleaner bathrooms, which employees didn't care if I spent extra time in there, which ones had better lighting for doing my makeup. I became an expert at the 5-minute transformation. Brush teeth, wash face, wet hair and style it, apply makeup to hide the shadows, change clothes, stuff dirty clothes into a bag, leave, look presentable, look like a person who had their life together. My body started giving out. My lower back was a constant scream of pain from the cramped sleeping positions. I'd wake up unable to straighten fully for the first hour, had to walk hunched over until my muscles loosened. My neck had a permanent crick. I smelled like someone who lived in a car no matter how much deodorant I applied. 3 months, 90 days. I stopped counting after that because numbers made it too real. My grandmother came back on a Saturday morning in early autumn. I know the day and time exactly because they're burned into my memory. Saturday, 6:14 a.m., October 7th. I was asleep in my car, parked on the street in front of what used to be my house, what was supposed to be my house. I'd started parking there sometimes out of some masochistic need to see what I'd lost, to remind myself that this wasn't a nightmare but actual reality. The house looked beautiful from the outside. My mother had put a wreath on the front door. The lawn was mowed. They were living my life and doing just fine without me. I woke up to someone knocking on my car window. The glass was fogged from my breath, and I had to wipe it clear to see who was there. My grandmother's face appeared through the cleared circle, and I watched her expression transform in real time from confusion to concern to absolute horror as her eyes took in the scene. The blanket I was wrapped in, the bags of clothes piled in the back seat, the fast food wrappers I'd been meaning to throw away, the pillow I'd made from a bundled-up sweatshirt, the evidence of 2 months of living in 8 feet of metal and glass. "Chloe?" Her voice was muffled through the window, but I could hear the shock in it. "What? Why are you sleeping in your car? Why are you here? Why aren't you in your house?" I couldn't answer. Couldn't find words. I just stared at her through the glass while my brain tried to process that she was real. She was here. She'd finally come back. "Open the door, sweetheart. Please. Talk to me." My hands shook as I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The morning air was cold, autumn settling in properly now, and I was wearing the same clothes I'd slept in, which were the same clothes I'd worn to work yesterday. I probably smelled. I definitely looked awful. My grandmother's eyes were scanning everything. The back seat mess, my face, the bags, back to my face. "How long?" she asked. "How long have you been living in your car?" 2 months, almost 3. My voice came out hoarse. 2 months? She looked like I'd slapped her. "And you're parked in front of your own house? Chloe, what happened? Why aren't you inside?" "It's not mine anymore." "What do you mean it's not yours? The deed is in your name. I made sure of that." A car door slammed. We both turned to see my mother running down the driveway of the house wearing her bathrobe, her face a mask of panic. She'd probably been watching out the window, had seen my grandmother's car pull up, had seen us talking. "Mom, what are you doing here? I thought you weren't coming back until next month." My mother's voice was too loud, too bright, desperately cheerful in a way that couldn't hide the fear underneath. My grandmother ignored her completely. She kept her eyes on me, and I'd never seen her look so serious. "Chloe, tell me everything. Right now. All of it." "Mom, this isn't a good time. Chloe was just leaving." My mother tried to grab my arm, but my grandmother stepped between us. "Do not touch her. Chloe, tell me what happened. Every detail. And don't leave anything out." So I did. All of it. Every word came pouring out like I'd been storing them up for months, waiting for someone to finally ask. The pressure they'd put on me from the moment they found out about the house. The 2 weeks of psychological torture, being called selfish, being told my own nephews thought I hated them, how they'd worn me down until I broke and agreed to give them the house, how they'd moved in within days, how they'd told me I had a month but then terminated the lease early and locked me out with only 15 days warning, how they'd blocked my numbers so I couldn't reach them, how I'd been trying to call her for months but she was overseas with no cell service. "That's not how it happened," my mother interrupted, her voice high and desperate. "She's exaggerating, making herself the victim. She chose to leave. She was being dramatic and—" I said, my grandmother's voice cut through like ice, "not to touch her. And I didn't ask you. I asked Chloe." I kept talking, and with every word, my grandmother's face got harder. By the time I finished explaining about the car, the gas station bathrooms, the 60-plus days of not having a home, she looked like I'd never seen her, furious in a cold, terrifying way that was somehow worse than if she'd been screaming. The front door of the house opened. My brother stumbled out, clearly just woken up, probably by my mother who'd run inside to get him. When he saw my grandmother, he froze on the porch. "Everyone out here. Now." My grandmother's voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority that made even my brother obey. Within 5 minutes, they were all there. My brother, his husband, my father rubbing sleep from his eyes. The kids stayed inside, thank God. At least someone had the sense not to traumatize them with whatever was about to happen. My grandmother stood in the yard of the house she'd given me, the house my family had stolen, and looked at each of them like she was seeing them for the first time. "So," she said, her voice deadly calm, "let me make absolutely certain I understand this correctly. I give Chloe a house. You pressure her into giving it to you through weeks of emotional manipulation and guilt. She agrees. You move in, then you kick her out of your apartment and block her from contacting you. And for the past 3 months, while you've been living in her house, she's been sleeping in her car. Is that accurate?" "She's young and single," my mother tried. "She doesn't have children to feed. She doesn't have real responsibilities. We needed the space more than she did. Your son is 28 years old and has never worked a full day in his life. His husband is the same. But you think they need a house more than the one person in this family who actually has a job? My grandmother's voice was getting quieter, which somehow made it more threatening. My brother dropped to his knees on the grass, actually dropped like he'd seen people do in movies. Tears were already streaming down his face. Please, Grandma, please don't do this. My kids have nothing to do with any of this. They're innocent. They didn't ask to be born into this situation. I swear I'll get a job. I swear I'll make it right. Just please don't punish my children for my mistakes. Get up. My grandmother didn't even look at him. Stop performing. You're 28 years old. You've been promising to get a job since you were 18. I'm done believing you. And your children aren't being punished. They have two able-bodied parents who can work to support them like normal people do. She could have knocked on the door any time. My mother tried a different angle, pointing at me with a trembling finger. She was right outside. She chose to sleep in her car. That's not our fault. She could have swallowed her pride and asked for help. You knew? My grandmother's voice went very quiet. Dangerous. You knew she was sleeping out here? The silence that followed was damning. My mother's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. You knew. My grandmother's voice shook now, with rage barely contained. You saw her car parked here and you knew your daughter was sleeping in it. And you did nothing. We thought she was being dramatic. My father finally spoke up, his voice defensive. We thought she'd come inside eventually. We didn't think she'd actually stay out there. For 3 months? You thought she was being dramatic for 3 months? No answer to that. My grandmother looked at my mother for a long, long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion I'd never heard from her before. Something that sounded like grief. I went hungry so you wouldn't have to, she said. And my mother flinched like she'd been hit. I slept on the streets so you'd have a roof over your head. I worked myself to the bone, ruined my hands with sewing, gave up any chance of a normal young adulthood. Also, you and your daughter would never know what poverty felt like. And now you've done to your own daughter exactly what my parents did to me 50-some years ago. You threw her away. Except you did it knowing exactly how much it would hurt because you lived through my version of it. You knew, and you did it anyway. That's not fair, my mother started, but her voice broke. You have until noon tomorrow to get out of this house. All of you. Take your things and go. If you're not gone by noon, I'm calling the police and filing charges for illegal occupation and abandonment. And I'm done. Do you hear me? Done. No more monthly payments. No more emergency money. No more bailing you out. Figure it out yourselves for once in your lives. Mom, please. My mother was crying now. Actual tears. We have nowhere to go. The kids should have thought about that before you let your daughter sleep in a car for 3 months. We'll be homeless. Then you'll understand what you did to her. My grandmother turned her back on them and put her arm around my shoulders. Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you inside. Your house. Where you should have been all along. The next day at exactly noon, they were on the sidewalk with their stuff. No rental truck this time. Just whatever they could fit in my dad's car and my brother's vehicle. My mother tried one last time to catch my grandmother's eye, but she just turned away. Not one more dollar, my grandmother said. Not to them specifically, just to the air. Not one more cent for parasites. I walked into my house for the first time as its actual owner. The room smelled like other people's lives. There were dishes in the sink, toys on the floor, someone else's mess everywhere. But it was mine. Finally, really mine. My grandmother helped me clean. We didn't talk much, just worked side by side, erasing the evidence that they'd ever been there. She stayed for a week, making sure I was okay, that I ate real food, that I slept in an actual bed. I kept waking up panicked, thinking I was back in the car and she'd be there with tea, reminding me I was safe. You can rebuild from here, she said before she left. This is your foundation. Don't let anyone take it from you again. The messages started a few days after she left. Numbers I didn't recognize, but the pleading tone was familiar. Please, we have nowhere to go. The kids are asking for you. We made a mistake. Family forgives family. I blocked every number. Every single one. Sarah called me that first week after I'd finally responded to her text asking if I was okay. I invited her over, and we sat in my backyard with coffee while I told her everything. She cried when I got to the part about living in the car, and then she got angry. I knew something was wrong. I should have pushed harder. I wouldn't have told you. I was too ashamed. You shouldn't have been ashamed. They should be. She squeezed my hand. I'm glad you're here now. In your home. Where you belong. Having one real friend felt like more family than I'd ever had. 3 months later, I was kneeling in my backyard, planting flowers in the small garden I'd been planting. Daisies and lavender. things that would come back every year without much effort. My hands were dirty, the sun was warm on my back, and for the first time in forever, I felt peaceful. My phone buzzed, unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Chloe? My mother's voice was small, defeated in a way I'd never heard. Your brother got a job. Delivery driver. It doesn't pay much, but it's something. We found a small apartment. The 4 of them in 2 bedrooms. Your father and I are staying with his sister. I said nothing. The kids ask about you sometimes. They don't understand why you don't visit anymore. Her voice cracked. I know we hurt you. I know we don't deserve forgiveness. But if you ever… I hung up. The phone buzzed again. Same number. I stared at it. This little device that used to be a leash. A way for them to pull me back whenever they wanted. The buzzing stopped, then started again. Persistent. Like they'd always been. Something happened then that I didn't expect. I laughed. Not a happy laugh, but this short, shocked sound like I couldn't quite believe what I was about to do. I blocked the number, placed the phone in my pocket, went back to my flowers. I didn't need to know where they were living, how they were managing, whether the kids were okay. That wasn't cruelty. That was survival. They'd made their choices when they let me sleep in a car for 3 months while living in my house. I'd made mine when I finally understood that family isn't who shares your blood. It's who sees you suffering and actually cares. My grandmother had been right all those months ago. This house, this space, this life, it was mine. I'd almost lost it by trying to be good, by believing that love meant sacrifice even when the sacrifice would destroy me. But I'd learned. Family was someone driving 3 hours to make sure you were okay. Family was a coworker who offered help without judgment. Family was honest love, not manipulation, dressed up as need. I patted down the soil around a lavender plant and sat back on my heels. The sun was setting, painting my little backyard gold and orange. Inside, my house waited. My bed, my kitchen, my space to exist without apology. For the first time in my life, I understood what freedom actually meant. It meant owing nothing to people who only took. It meant sleeping in peace. It meant planting a garden and knowing I'd be here to see it grow. It meant finally being free.